Hoy, hoy, BOA Nation. This is your buddy Binnall. Before we unleash this week's episode with Karac St. Laurent, I want to take a brief moment here to give you all a heads up that we will be taking the month of February off. We've been running, I think, now for 10 months since our last break after the April anniversary show, and I could use a little recharge here at the HQ. And hopefully stockpile shows, even though you won't be hearing from us, we'll be recording, hopefully at a blistering pace. I've already got one show in the can. I got two more scheduled over the next week, and I've got a slew of folks that I'm hoping to talk to during this quote-unquote break. So that's about it. You're not going to be hearing from me for about a month. I can't give you a specific return date for March. I'm looking at the calendar now. It's doubtful that it'll be the 4th. More likely it'll be the 11th or the 18th. So we're looking at like mid-March return for BOA. One thing that I never mentioned on the program, of course, at the beginning is all the plugs you hear on these other shows. So, you know, if you could like us on YouTube, that would be great. Comment, thumbs up, all that stuff. Subscribe, of course, if you can. All the places where you can leave a review, that would be awesome. Much appreciated. Apparently, it helps the visibility of the program. I don't know. I don't know anything about this stuff. I just do interviews, man. But I hear it on all these other programs, and apparently it's what you're supposed to do. So YouTube, hit the like button and subscribe and all that shit. With all that said, coming up, here is Karac St. Laurent, and you'll be hearing from me in a few weeks. Have a great February.
Ladies and gentlemen, Binnall of America!
And now, ladies and gentlemen, your host, Tim Binnall.
No commercials, no subscriptions, no network, no rules. And at the end of the day, my friends, no comparison. Welcome to another edition of BOA The Revival. We're delving back into the cryptid realm this week here on the program with my buddy Karac St. Laurent. And I love his name. We're going to find out about that as well. I assume that's his real name. We'll find out in a moment. But he's a filmmaker, researcher, cryptozoologist, and he's made a bunch of different things. He's got a YouTube channel that people should check out. It's Crash Course Cryptozoology. It's also a Facebook group. And he's been producing stuff for many, many years. He's kind of taken a little bit of a break these last 6 months to a year. But it seems like he's right on the cusp of bursting back out onto the scene here in 2026. And it was sort of an interesting bit of sort of synchronistic kismet that brought Karac to the show, because I was up in Exeter just on a whim. I like to go up in the springtime once the weather gets a little bit nicer around Memorial Day. So I was up there this year, and I went into one of the shops, and I'm like, that looks like Karac, who I have known from cryptozoological circles over the years. Saw him at Whitehall, saw him up at Laurent's event in Portland over the years. So we've crossed paths many times over the years. And I'm like, is that Karac St. Laurent? So I went over and I'm like, Karac? Because I was like half like, oh no, this isn't him. This is going to be really awkward. But it was. And I'm like, holy shit, dude, this is crazy. It's great to see you. So we got to chatting, and one thing led to another. And here he is on Binnall of America. He's, as I said, he's done a bunch of stuff. You got to go over to Crash Course Cryptozoology. He's kind of put it all into one place. And he's done a bunch of different little films, longer films, not little. There's a documentary that we're going to kick off the conversation about, release the Bodette film, which I've mentioned on Binnall of America over the years, and a whole bunch of other stuff, long form stuff, shorter clips, just a real feast. I was telling Karac today, right before we got started, I'm like, I got real excited putting these notes together, because I'm like, oh, I want to talk about that too. Oh, I want to talk about that too. So we got some good stuff here to chat about this week on Binnall of America. With all that said, Karac, welcome to the show. It's great to have you, brother.
It's so great to be on, man. Thank you for having me.
Now, That's what I was saying. You have one of the more theatrical names. I don't know what Saint anything. So I was like, oh my God, this is cool. You give Barnaby Jones a run for money here on theatrical names. This is your real name, right? This isn't a stage name.
Yeah, it's my
wild.
It came from, let's see, my dad's side of the family. My dad's last name is not St. Laurent, but his dad's last name was St. Laurent. And I forget exactly what the circumstances are, but I ended up with that as my last name. And my first name, it's funny because I have Irish heritage pretty close to my generation on my mom's side of the family. And it is a Gaelic name, but it doesn't actually come from my mom's side. My dad was a big Led Zeppelin fan, and he one of the drummers for Led Zeppelin's son was named Karac Pendragon, and he insisted that we name me that.
All right. Is it Karac or Karac?
You can pronounce it either way, but the most common one that I go with is Karac.
Karac. All right. Well, we'll go with that then. I apologize for
no worries.
Watching that. So as we always do, first time guest, the bio, the background. Who is Karac St. Laurent? How'd you get mixed up in all this? How'd you get interested in this? And then how'd you decide to start doing stuff? Because lots of folks get interested in this and they're listening to the show right now. Then they're like, I'm good with making movies. I'm all set with that, or I'm whatever, but guys like you and me, we're like, I'm going to do shit. I'm going to do a podcast. You're going to make films and stuff. So, how'd you get interested in this? And then how'd you decide to do stuff?
Well, I've been interested in this stuff since I was a kid. I mean, if I had to pinpoint exactly when, I don't know if I really could. But I think one of the most formative experiences to get me really involved in cryptozoology was I had what I would call a Sasquatch sighting when I was in either third or fourth grade, where I grew up on my family's property. And that was just a massive thing for me. And,
where was this?
This was over out in Lyndeborough, New Hampshire, which,
okay,
no surprise if nobody listening has never heard of that place. Like maybe 1,000 people live out there. And the last time the census bothered to check was in like 2015 or something. So,
okay. All right.
Let's see. If people know where Nashua is, it's like 30 minutes west, I think. Of
okay.
Nashua.
Yeah. All right. So it's in that. Yeah. Okay. So yeah, New Englanders listening will know what we're talking about. We got folks all over the world. So yeah. It's like
most people will probably hear of like Milford or Wilton. Those are the closest towns.
Right. Okay. Yeah. I got you.
Yeah. And, that was a really big thing. I had a few things happen out there afterwards, but nothing as notable as that. And in later years, I found out that there were a few other people who had weird experiences in the same area. But for me, that was the big introduction to the whole unknown species aspect of, what at the time was just a little kid's fascination with monsters, really.
Right.
And from there, I mean, my parents would buy me cryptozoology books. I remember my first one was probably Lauren Coleman's Cryptozoology A to Z.
Oh, yeah.
But it may also have been Tales of the Cryptids, which is a great one by Rick Spears and Kelly
Milner Hall,
I think her name is. Yeah.
Kelly Milner Hall. Yeah, we had her on the show. You are, believe it or not, now, I think the third guest we've had who cites her book as sort of getting them into this. Yeah, you're like the third like relatively young guy in this field who's mentioned that book being really the impetus for them getting mixed up in all this.
Oh yeah, I used to set up a tent in my backyard, and I would have some books piled up in there, and that was one of them. Yeah, I mean, so that was great. And as I went through being a teenager and got into being a young adult and was a little more independent and did more stuff, I really got into reading about cryptozoology more, and I loved talking about it. And there's not a lot of people you go to high school with who want to talk about cryptozoology.
Yeah.
So I ended up forming the Crash Course Cryptozoology YouTube channel just about 9 years ago now. And I just wanted to talk about cryptozoology at a camera, basically, or at a microphone. And I talked about everything from, Loch Ness Monster photographs to interesting stuff on like the Jersey Devil that I found and, all that kind of stuff. Yeah. And eventually around, I really don't even know how this fully came about at this point, but at some point that snowballed into getting into cryptozoology social circles and the people who were making film projects. I got to talk to people who had worked a little bit with like small town monsters who at the time were kind of new.
Yeah.
And yeah, I just through that, I ended up being able to just go on really fun expeditions with people and film shoots and ended up filming my own stuff, obviously. Gone to doing a podcast for the channel, just all kinds of fun stuff that I'm really happy that I got the opportunity to do.
Yeah, you've done a lot of stuff, man. Like I said, when I was digging through the page, at some point I was like, oh, I gotta stop now because I'm going too deep into the archive. I'm gonna something on him from like 8 years ago, and I'm gonna be like, in 2018, you made this video. Let's circle back to the Bigfoot sighting you had as a kid. I'm sure and I don't blame you in the least. I'm sure you've told this story many times. If it happened to me, I wouldn't shut up about it. So
fair enough.
Give me sort of the rundown on this. How old were you and how did it all go down?
Well, my memory is a little bit foggy as to like the time but part of the confusion was that I actually did submit a BFRO report, but I submitted it a couple of years after. Yeah. And I had always thought it was around the same time. So for a while, I actually had the year wrong, but I remembered what grade I was in. So I guess that would have put it around 2000 and I think 9 or 10, 2009 or 2010. We'll say 2009, probably late summer 2009, because it was late summer. I remember that. Yeah. And the way that our property was set up was we had these 3 houses in the property, and past that, aside from the neighbor's house that was, like maybe half a mile down the road, it was just all woods out there. There's nothing out there. And we had a lot of wildlife activity there. I mean, we had seen and had incidents with black bears multiple times because they just got very comfortable coming onto the property and all that. But, when you're a kid growing up out there, that's not really something you think about. Yeah, you probably should. So I was out one morning and I had locked myself out of the house by accident. I didn't want to wake up my dad because he liked to sleep in. So I didn't go knocking on the door. And if I remember right, it was probably sometime between 9 and like maybe 10 to 11 a.m., somewhere in that range. Okay. And we had this long, gravelly driveway. And it looked like it was going to rain. And I remembered that there was this log up to the side of the driveway a little bit that had tree cover over it. And I figured if I didn't want to wake up my dad yet, I might as well just sit somewhere and get some rain cover.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah. And so I sat down and I was just maybe sitting down for a few minutes, just, playing with sticks or something, when at some point I heard something behind me. So I turned to look, and the distance is hard to tell too. If I'm measuring it by like how far apart telephone poles are, which is like 100 feet or so, I guess I'd say probably between 200 to 300 feet from me. Okay. Was this just massive person-shaped black figure. And it was really unbelievably massive. Yeah. It was, going off of the shoulders, this thing was built like a brick. Yeah. And it had this, what I thought was a small head at the time on top, because it looked really small. The whole thing is this uniform black color, so it's kind of hard to make out features. Yeah. Looking back on it, I don't think that the head was small. I think that it was low set on the shoulders. And so it gave the impression when facing forward that it had a small head. Of course, that's if I saw a Bigfoot, because I want to leave a caveat that, this is my experience. It doesn't mean that I interpreted it correctly per se. And I'm staring at this thing for maybe 10 seconds, but it really did feel like forever. And it was just totally quiet. And I don't know if it was looking at me. I got the impression that it was, because it was just so still that it almost felt like we had caught each other doing something.
Right. Yeah, that was kind of, that's what I was about.
Yeah. And as I'm looking at it, not taking my eyes off it at all, if you're me and I'm it and I'm looking at you, it turns like this. So it turns to what would have been, I guess, the southern direction. And the crazy part is that when it turned, I remembered specifically that when it was facing away from me, it looked like when Patty has her back to the camera in the Patterson-Gimlin film. Okay. In the sense that instead of that small head, I could see the slope of the back of the neck now, and I realized that it had some kind of musculature back there. I could, at that point, too, realize that it had this kind of conical nature to the top of its head. Yeah. And on two legs, it just started walking away. And I watched it walk away. And once it was gone, I started freaking out, knocked on my door. I didn't tell my dad what was up because, how do you tell your dad that when you're a kid?
Yeah.
And I went back later, and by later I mean like months later. I still played outside and all that, but I didn't really like going to that particular spot for a little while. But I went back there, and the cool part about this is that I distinctly remembered that it was standing directly behind this old broken birch tree. And we have a lot of birch out there, but it's kind of sparse. So when you see one of the trees, you kind of remember where it is.
Yeah.
And I had measuring tape with me for my dad's toolkit. So I measured where the top of its head was, because it was like just under the break in the tree where it had just kind of fallen over. And that was about 7 1/3 to 7.5 feet off the ground.
Oh, wow.
So that's about how tall it was.
And it moved like fluidly when it walked away, right? It was kind of like...
No, yeah. I don't even think I remember if it made noise. I didn't pay attention to the noise.
Right.
Yeah. I don't recall any sense that it like sounded very heavy or that it sounded kind of clumsy or anything like that. It was, it walked like a person. It was not the way that, because you see videos of bears when they get up on their hind legs and walk for a distance. It was nothing at all.
That's what I was kind of getting at. And too, like, why? Yeah.
Like a person taking steps.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. I'm sure, the skeptical person at first is like, well, you just saw a bear like standing on. So like, first of all, why would a bear do that in that moment and then stay that way and then walk away? Like, it's kind of.
Yeah,
They're scared of us as we are of them, if I've been told. So it's like,
even predatory animals prefer to not, we're so unusual to predators out in the wild that predatory animals tend to stay away from us.
Right.
A lot of bear encounters can be avoided because the bear is just so weirded out to know what to do exactly in this situation.
Makes perfect sense. Yeah.
Let alone something that doesn't need to eat us to live in a really dangerous situation or anything. So
yeah, that's crazy. That's a wild story. Yeah, I could see how that would have a profound impact on me. I'm sure it did.
Yeah, it was it was a very, and I think about that, every day I think about that.
Wow.
One cool detail that I've noticed throughout thinking about it through years and years is, for anyone listening, look up the Provo Canyon Bigfoot video from Utah. From the front, it looked exactly like that. But the first time I saw the video, I got chills because it was like, that's it. That is the shape of the thing that I saw.
Weird. Wild.
Yeah.
That's crazy. Yeah. You don't think about Bigfoot. I don't, but think too much about Bigfoot like in New England. But then the more you kind of look at the area, like the Western Mass, Western New Hampshire, Vermont, the Whitehall area, Maine. There's a lot of area up there for Bigfoot,
especially because that's when you get up into Canada. And it is interesting because I think that we're so used to all of the not to downplay it, but the classical literature of Sasquatch talking about the rainforests out in the Pacific Northwest. For one thing, we have a small rainforest in Appalachia out here in the Northeast. So we have that habitat going, but we also have just like sort of our own Eastern variation on the terrain and on the plants that exist out in the Pacific Northwest. And once you get into the alpine environments, that's a really ideal habitat for a large, supposedly omnivorous mammal to be living.
Yeah, absolutely. I remember the first time I was in Whitehall and just sort of drove through that area. You look around, it's just these mountains covered in trees. And it's like, how could it, if a Bigfoot's real, I can't see why it couldn't exist up in this.
It's overwhelming.
Territory. And that's tons of stuff like that. Yeah.
Mm.
So I had met you before, actually. When I saw you in Whitehall a few years ago, that's when you gave me a copy of Release the Bodette film. You gave me a DVD. Weirdly enough, I had it in my car still. So when I came and saw you in Exeter accidentally, I was like, hold on, I got to show you this. And it was the only DVD I had actually in the car at the time. But how'd you get turned on to the Bodette story? Let's talk about this. We've mentioned it on the show before in the past, but you've gone and made a whole documentary on it, and people can see it in its complete form at Crash Course Cryptozoology on the YouTube channel. It's Release the Bodette film. Scroll down a little bit, you'll see it there, folks. But how did what the spark for you to do a documentary on this case, if you will?
Well, when I was, again, still a kid, I, like so many of us, got introduced to Monster Quest. And that was, that was my generation's In Search Of, basically. It was the cryptozoology series that you watched if you were into cryptids. And their first episode, and one of their best episodes, is on Champ. And it's called America's Loch Ness. And for one thing, what a title, right? How influential would that be to be like, whoa, we have a Loch Ness monster out here?
Yeah.
I was just so fascinated with that story, just of Champ in general, because it seemed like it really had such interesting evidence going for it. Of course, there's the Mansi photograph, which is so interesting of a story just in and of itself, regardless of if it's a photo of an actual animal, the story behind it and the mystery of where it was taken and what's happened to the negative and all of the different theories as to what could be in the photo, the processes that have had to go even just to trying to find where the photo was taken. Just such an interesting chronicling of that story has taken place. And of course, there's the echolocation recordings, which I think are amazing. I mean, I've reached out to places that have never heard of Champ before, especially when I lived on the coast of New Hampshire. We have a few institutions there that just work with marine life in general. And I would sometimes send recordings into those institutions and ask them what they were. And every one of them came back, we think it's a whale. Where'd you get this? And then I would have to either break it to them that this is supposedly in a freshwater lake or just not say anything. But I think when did I learn about the Bodette footage? I learned about the Bodette footage in, I think, 2019.
Yeah.
I want to say 2019, early 2019. And I forget how I came across it. I might have just been scrolling through different forums and websites that talked about Champ. And eventually I came across this thing called the Bodette footage. And it was a news segment from ABC back in 2000. I always get this date wrong. I think it was 2005. And it's this small little snippet of footage with a few other clips that last only about a second. So altogether, there's maybe 15 seconds maximum of the footage actually published. And there was a short interview with the guys who supposedly filmed it, but it's really cut short and you don't get a whole lot of the story. You just get that the guys, Dick Offelter and Peter Bodette, were fishing out on a boat near the southern mouth of the Au Sable River on the New York side of Lake Champlain. Okay. And they saw something in the water and filmed it for a little bit. And the story is a lot more extensive than that, but it never really got aired. And I was just so fascinated because I think I caught on after a little bit, like, this is so weird that this is supposedly such great footage and there's nothing to show for. Even the shot that they show, which to me is a very impressive shot, is still compared to the supposed minutes of footage that originally existed, this is nothing. What happened?
Right.
And let's see, I guess I would have learned through either Scott. I think I learned through Scott Martis, who was a Lake Champlain researcher, and he became a friend of mine. And he was a great guy. And I had run in the same social circles as him for a while. And I forget exactly how it came up, but eventually I think I learned through him that the story was that the footage had the legal rights sold to an attorney in New Jersey named Scott Shagan. And I think he was involved with some kind of process that Peter Bodette's family was undergoing. So he knew the family, and as part of some kind of, distribution of ownership of stuff, the footage got involved in there. And a few people have been allowed to see the footage under a kind of loose non-disclosure agreement. So most of them ended up talking about it. And I mean, from the people that saw it, for one thing, the opinions seemed to differ. I mean, when I began to investigate the Bodette film independently, it was like a Scooby-Doo episode, Tim. Right.
Weird.
I I reached out to this one woman, Melanie Stiasany, who worked with not marine, because I guess it's freshwater, but with freshwater species in and around Lake Champlain, just in the general Vermont region there. And she had at one point given an interview to an article that you can still, I think you can still dig it up somewhere, where she says that she had watched some of the Bodette film and she thought it was a species of fish that was familiar to the area. And watching it, I just didn't really understand what she meant. But, it's also a small snippet. So I wanted to get the details on what she had seen.
Right.
And one of the first things that really was like, this is getting really weird, is not weird as in like suspicious, just weird as in what a story this is going to be, was I talked to her and she was like, I don't recall ever watching this. Which, it could just be that she's getting up there in age and doesn't remember.
Right.
It could be any number of things. Maybe the article meant to name a coworker of hers and named her by accident. I don't know.
Yeah.
But that was one of the first things I hit that was like, I need to make something on this. This is crazy.
Yeah.
It's just sitting out there and nothing's being done with it. So I teamed up with Scott Martis and a camera crew and just a small time, somebody I had met who was also interested. And we went to Lake Champlain for a couple of days and we did some interviews, most of them remote, but we got one or two that were in person with people who had seen stuff out on the lake. And a lot of the documentary turned into a chronicling of, again, just this weird story of the Bodette film. I was able, through Joseph Citro, who's a great chronicler of high strangeness in Vermont. He had
legend,
yeah, seriously. He had a transcript of an interview that Affolter and Bodette did that never got aired, but the transcript was available. So their entire account is in text in that transcript. And they described a pretty incredible encounter. I mean, it was supposedly these two different animals that were fairly large, swimming under the boat and would come up to the side and seemed to be growing in hostility somehow. Dick Affolter said that he was worried one of them was going to ram itself into the boat at one point.
Jeez.
And so they ended up just getting out of there after a little bit. They describe a moment where at one point, one of the heads comes up above the water and the sunlight glints off of the eye. And so you get a really good idea of the size of the eye.
Oh, wow.
And they said it was the size of like a dinner plate. So it was a pretty big animal, whatever it was.
Jesus.
Yeah, stuff that is not in the available footage.
Yeah.
That I would absolutely kill to see. I mean, that would be incredible. And even in the footage itself, there's just a lot of interesting details. I mean, there's this one part, it's kind of the money shot of the existing footage that's been publicized, where this thing with a head, I guess, and a long neck comes up and it's right under the water on the side of the boat, like someone's leaning over looking at it. And if it comes like this, it kind of swings its head. But right before it swings its head, it looks like it opens its mouth and snaps or something like that. Because the end of the head changes and goes like this and then closes again.
Right.
So it's a really cool piece of footage. And it doesn't mean that it necessarily, as much as I would love to say that it does, I can't in full confidence say, oh, this is footage of an unknown species in Lake Champlain. I don't know that for sure. I think that there's a good chance that if it is, that it's really important footage. And part of the documentary is kind of an assertion for the idea that if we're taking this mystery at all seriously, we do have to consider, do we have a freshwater species that's rare, that hides very easily, that we just don't know about? Is it unique to Lake Champlain? And on the off chance that it is, we don't have a body and we don't have DNA evidence. We have evidence that something echolocates when there should be nothing echolocating inside the lake. The footage could be an important stepping stone to preserving that species if it exists.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And that was a big part of that documentary, was making that's why it's called Released Bodette Film, is I think, for one thing, that in the name of taking an honest approach to conservation, we can't just kind of dangle this. I think that's the wrong thing to do. And, there's also the fact that, this guy is asking for upwards of $100,000 apparently for the footage. And then if it turns out to be fake, it's like, well, then this is then this is almost worse. So,
Right.
Yeah.
No, I love the title because it's like a call to action, which I like a lot.
Thank you.
So how long? So how long is the footage? So there's a snippet that was in the newscast. I know about that. So how long is the, for lack of a, how would I describe this? The lockdown, the actual film. Like how long is it that we know of? I mean, do we even know?
Honestly, I'm sure that I knew it at one point. I'm sure that somebody, because I talked to one person who had seen it and was able to get information from two other people second-handedly who had seen it. And I'm sure I asked at some point, or it's in the transcript that Joseph Citro gave, how long the actual footage is, but honestly, I can't tell you off the top of my head.
So, but it's significant enough that it's like
I would say it's in the ballpark of 5 to 10 minutes, probably somewhere
that's
around
insane.
There.
Yeah, that's
so. Yeah, I mean, it's supposedly a film of this whole weird encounter that both of these guys had, and they get really close to these things to the point again where, you know, that man, what I wouldn't give to see the shot of that eye coming up above the wall.
I know. Now, in the process of making the movie, did you reach out to this lawyer who has the footage to even?
I attempted to, yeah. And, you know, to be fair, I'm not sure how important this whole shtick is to him.
Right.
It could be that the interest for people to actually come and see it and sign this kind of loose NDA has been so sparse that this is just sitting in a desk somewhere, and he's no longer focusing on that.
I have to imagine that it is, because it's like not many people really know about it, and B care enough to pursue it in a way that like you or I mean, if I had the money, I'd be on the phone this guy tomorrow and be like,
I mean, when I first released the documentary, there were people talking about doing like a GoFundMe or something for it, which is nice, but $100,000 is a lot of money. And but I mean, I don't know what the status is with that. Other people have reached out to him prior to me filming the documentary and were at least able to talk about it with him. I had no such luck. And again, to be fair, he's an attorney. I'm sure that at least he's got more immediate fish to fry than some 20-year-old at the time asking him about lake monster footage. Who knows what else he's got going on in his career. I also don't know how old Scott Shagan is. I've never spoken to the guy. I mean, I think I knew he was still around, but who knows? I don't know.
Now, how about the two guys? Have you been in have you tried to track down these two?
Really dropped off the radar. I did try to find any kind of contact info for either Dick Offalter or Pete Bodette. I got really close to finding something for Pete Bodette, but it was some Facebook account that he had stopped using, 10 years ago or something like that. So it was. I think that was part of the frustration. Is it's not like these are people who are like cryptozoology people. These whether they faked anything or not, these are just two guys, and people come and go in online social circles and in local social circles. I don't know if either of them still live on Lake Champlain.
That's true.
I think I found one person who might have been related to Peter Bodette, but it's one of those things where it's like, well, is this like his family Bodette, or is this another Bodette family that lives in the area? Because sometimes, I've met plenty of people who, like my father's side of the family is Nadeau's. Nadeau is a really common last name, and I've met a lot of people who I have no relation to, whose last name happens to be Nadeau. Yeah. So it was kind of a dead end there, unfortunately. The closest that I could get was talking to Chuck Pogan, who's a lake monster researcher from Florida, and he had seen the footage. And he got the impression that it was some kind of enormous turtle type animal. Now, the thing about Chuck Pogan is his research is a little bit debated, because there are some things that I think Chuck points out that are really interesting. At the same time, it's one of those things where it's like, there are photos that he talks about that when I see them, I don't really see the thing he's talking about. I think that there's some pareidolia mixed up in that. I did get to create a Photoshop recreation of what he says it looked like, and he said I got it down pretty much exactly. So I mean, maybe that's what it actually looks like. I don't know.
And one other avenue that you may have explored, maybe not. Did you try tracking down anyone from the TV segment? From the TV station, or even the reporter? Who knows? For all you know, dude, they might have a fucking copy.
You know what?
They might have been like, here's a copy, but you can only use this much. And then sitting there in the TV station. That'd be crazy.
Maybe. You know what? That is an interesting part of the story. And I don't think I did that. Scott Martis may have done that at one point.
Yeah.
But from what I recall, the story goes that Shagan had already owned the footage when it got aired, and he's the guy who sent it to ABC to get aired. And it was a one-time use agreement thing.
Gotcha.
And as far as I know, what happened is they picked out clips to show, and Shagan was not happy about the clips that were shown for the most part, because he thought there was a lot better stuff in the footage, and was like, these guys have no idea what they're doing. I'm just going to take this and go somewhere else, I guess. And
interesting. So then that would stand to reason. And then they would have, at some point, they had a copy of the fucking movie. If they pulled the clips, and then he was like, you pulled the wrong clips, then stands to reason they have the full version of the movie. That's interesting. I bet it is in the basement of some Vermont TV, because it's like a local TV report, right? This wasn't like ABC Nationalist. Yeah, I bet you the TV station has it.
I had never even thought of that. I really need to go back and see if I did that at some point, because I don't think I did, and that would be a good avenue to look for sure.
You find some intern that's sitting there today, and he's like, "Hold on, let me check." And then he's like, "Yeah, dude, I'll email you over it. We have it digitized on the."
That would be.
We didn't realize
they must have it digitized, because there's a segment where two guys are looking at it on a monitor, so they have a copy. They at least had a copy.
Yeah. Get on that, dude. We may have broken the case here.
I should.
Yeah, well, it's just such a crazy story that it's a great piece of footage. Then it gets like lost in the ether. Now it's under lock and key. It's like it's a great story beyond even like what the movie itself is. It's like like you were saying. It's like, this is weird. Like
it's crazy. It's like Indiana Jones or something. It's crazy.
Yeah, it would be really. I'm trying to get my head into sort of the minds of these players, and it's like, I think, and now this all went down before 2020, right? Yeah. You heard about it in 2019, so yeah.
I want to say this was August of 2019 that we did this, because I released the film in.
But when was the sighting and the filming of the?
The sighting was, I think, July 2005. Which is interesting. Which is interesting because, as far as I have seen, a lot of the sighting data that we have suggests that, what's the way to put that? That's the right time of year to see stuff like this happen.
Yeah.
Interestingly enough, almost to the day, like 10 years later, Scott Martis and his research partner at the time, William Dranganis, were investigating the film site at the mouth of the Ausable River, the southern one. And they got a sonar hit of some kind of animate thing under the water, about 15 feet long. Unfortunately, because I think that when you're setting up a lot of this equipment and you're not, they were great researchers. But when you're a researcher, it's hard to get things professionally set up. And they had this sonar, which was great, but they had forgotten to set up the screen capture for it. But we do have is photos of the screen. And it is a 15 or so foot long shape with what really looks like a long neck and head on one end. And it's below the boat. And it came out, if I'm not mistaken, when the fireworks for 4th of July started going off across the river.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, very interesting.
So it might have been like, what's going on out there? Yeah, weird. Yeah, that's really wild. Yeah, so I try to put myself into the minds of these guys. It's like, so it's about 20 years ago. It's like, and then we don't necessarily know if they handed the footage over to this guy specifically to make a profit, or if they sort of gave it to him as in lieu of payment for something.
That
right?
was
We know that.
I got was that it was,
yeah. So it's like, look, we can't pay you, but we've got this great video of America's Loch Ness Monster.
Yeah,
and the guy was
that
like,
you
well,
can
shit.
make money off of.
Yeah,
right.
Because the part of me too is like, look, like if I could talk to this guy, I'd be like, look, dude, it's been 20 years. Like you may have thought this was like $1 million movie, but it's been 20 years, man. No one wants to buy it. Like people will buy it from you, but like no one who can afford it.
Well,
right
that's,
now. So
that's the thing is, I don't know if maybe, let's say that Mr. Shagan does think that it's a legitimate film. The only people who would spend that much money on it are either extremely eccentrically interested investors, which are rare, let's just say.
Right. That guy, we should get the guy who bought the comedian Matt Rife, who wants to buy the Conjuring house and bought the Warrens Museum. He sounds like someone who will spend money like a drunk fool on this stuff. Someone get him in touch, get these guys connected. He'll probably buy it tomorrow. All right, so I didn't mean to interrupt you, but yeah, so the only people who would buy this are eccentrics with money, you're saying?
Yeah, or and maybe this is his target, is some kind of research institution, like a really serious marine life research institution. And the problem is that if that was his plan, he's skipping a major step, which is that this needs to be
studied.
Yeah, before it's ever put to any kind of monetary value in that regard. Because if we study it and it's bogus, then it was never worth anything.
Right. Like Woods Hole. I think that might have been what you were referencing around here. Woods Hole out on the coast of New England is like one of the they're not gonna like fucking just give this dude $100,000 on a supposed like video. Even if they can watch it, like what's that?
Trust me, this is worth the $100,000 you just gave me.
Yeah.
And there's every reason really to suspect that it will not be worth.
Yeah. And it's like you can watch it once and sign this NDA. All right. Are you ready to buy it? And it's like, no reputable academic place is going to do that. That's crazy. No. I was sort of thinking it through too, the logistics of this. Cause like, if let's say you or I bought it, dude, like it's like the Patterson-Gimlin thing where it's like the moment it gets online, dude, you completely, it's like driving the car off the lot. Like the value plummets. It's like as soon as that thing goes out there, it'll be spread like wildfire if it's as good as it is. Or if it's a shitty hoax, it'll still spread like wildfire if it's that good. But it's like you can't, you'd have to like do even if you were like, I'm going to do a pay-per-view online and on this date, I'll release it. As soon as it's out there, like that's it. You're not going to get really any like crazy return on your
do so much with that. I mean, you mentioning the Patterson film is great because even there is an example of that was shown to institutions for free. That was not sold to them. That was come see this and tell me what this is going to be worth scientifically. And even that, I mean, we're working with footage that at the time, I mean, I would dare say that if the rest of the Bodette film looks like the quality of what's available, the Patterson film is actually a higher quality looking film in terms of clarity.
I
mean, if that's the case, and it's never, this did not make anybody millions of dollars, the Patterson film.
Right.
It's not going to make this guy $100,000. It's not going to make anybody $100,000. And even if it had scientific value, I mean, it can't, the Bodette film will not prove that Champ exists. I don't think that's possible to do with just footage. I think more serious people interested, and if it does exist, that would provide a better outcome for whatever this species ends up being. That I think is kind of the mindset that I wanted to leave the audience with in Release the Bodette film, is that this thing is a mystery, and there's enough hinging on this mystery that maybe we should take this more seriously.
Yeah, for sure. It's it's a really captivating story. It's like a great piece of lost media.
In
the world of cryptozoology, where that kind of thing is even of a critical importance. It's like, this is like you're saying, it's like this would be holy grail type material. So
yeah, it really would. I mean, even just from like a historian perspective, if you're just somebody who loves the weird history in cryptozoology, this is like incredible. You know, imagine being able to have that. That would be pretty cool.
It would be awesome. It would be awesome. I hope, I hope someday we'll be able to see it. Cause like,
I hope so too.
I said, I don't necessarily, I mean, just, we're talking about it here, maybe that in a sense, keep it in the light zeitgeist, but it's like, I don't know if the value of the movie is actually going up or going down. Cause it's like, I don't think, I mean, we're talking about it and everything, but again, it's the more time goes by, it's like, dude, just release the movie. No one's going to buy it.
I agree. Well, enough time has gone by that I think that unless this, Dr. Seuss level eccentric guy comes by and decides to spend $100,000 on this, I don't think Shagan's going to make a penny off of it.
Yeah.
And it's now a question of, will this ever leave whatever vault it's in, or is this just going to be lost media forever?
Yeah, well, that's another thing too, where there's a part of me that like is, where do we have the 100,000 number from? Specific, like is that like solid from them?
There's two people who confirmed that was what they were
asking price. Okay.
Chuck Pogan was, he asked how much, and he was given that number. And believe it or not, one of the people who got to see this footage was Elizabeth von Muggenthaler, who was the bioacoustician who got the echolocation recordings in the early 2000s. And she totally dropped off the radar. I have no idea what happened to her. None of her friends know either. She kind of just dipped. But
strange.
One of the last big research things they all talked about, because there was kind of a group of people who were all involved in her research at Lake Champlain, was the fact that she got to see the Bodette film. She thought it was worth furthering the interest. And there was some mention that she was given an estimate that maybe she offered. What was it? There was some reference to what she had gotten paid for the Monster Quest episode she was in.
Yeah.
And that it was something like, oh, well, if you get paid that much to talk about Champ for like 5 minutes, then I should get X amount of money for giving you this footage. And it was a lot. I think it was 100,000 in that case.
Yeah. Interesting.
So more of a secondhand story with Elizabeth von Muggenthaler's estimates, but Chuck Pogan told me directly that he was told $100,000.
Yeah. Interesting. Yeah. See, because then, there's a part of me that's also like, I have a feeling if I showed up there at the office with like $100,000 cash in hand, somehow I still wouldn't be leaving that fucking place with that movie. I don't know why, but I think this
would be that simple, does it?
Right. Yeah. I feel like it would be like, well, now it's up to 250. So it was nice meeting you. Go something. There's something about this thing that just kind of doesn't sit right.
Well, if the von Muggenthaler story is true, that's kind of what they did with her, right? Where she comes up with an offer and they're like, well, you get paid this much for just talking about this. So I think maybe more should be on the table. And, it was, So
I'd be really interested to know also, and I mean, I know that these kind of things are done on a shoestring themselves, but it's like, I'd be really interested to know if any of these cable outlets pursued this at all. Like like Sci-Fi and shit. Like I mean, that is kind of a drop in the bucket for some of these places that if they could get it and have a big fucking premiere, they might recoup some, it might be worth it to them, and they might be the kind of people that would like pull the hammer down, and license it out and make it so they could make money. I'd be really interested if any enterprising like cable producer or cable network reached out to this guy and tried to negotiate something. Because to me, that would be one avenue where I in a sense, I'm surprised that it hasn't, because it is kind of like, it is very peripheral. I mean, you have to be really intense into this to know about it, but it wouldn't take very long to smarten people up and it'd be like, it's this video, it's been under wraps for 20 years. And we bought it, and now we're going to reel it to the world on TV or whatever. Sign up for a streaming package or what, all that shit.
Well, that was kind of the whole point behind making the documentary, I think, was just to get the story out there. Because, I mean, even in big budget productions I guess maybe Monster Quest wasn't as big as it got at the time because it was its first episode. But there's tons of documentaries out there about Champ. And I'm telling you, I've still yet to see one that really talks about the Bodette film.
Yeah.
And I think it was one of those things where, and this is kind of how my other documentaries started to follow, I think. I wanted to talk about niche cases, whether it was a well-known cryptid that had a niche case that involved it, or an entirely niche cryptid subject. And I wanted to make documentaries that were entirely focused upon that for upwards of 2 hours, you know?
Well, we'll pivot off the Bodette film. I could probably keep talking about this for a while. I could really find it interesting. It's such a crazy fucking story. Another thing you have at the series you have at Crash Course Cryptozoology is the Man-Wolf files. And these are sort of it's you know, they're 20 minutes each. These are akin to an actual TV show, folks. These are like real videos. It's awesome. And I couldn't watch them all over the time I had when we were going to get Karac on the show. But I what I thought was interesting, because many episodes of Man-Wolf Files, is many of them sort of dissect different alleged DogMan photos. That took me by surprise in and of itself. That, like, I think you dissect at least six or so different ones I've never heard of.
Yeah.
You know, stuff I've never heard of, but alleged pictures. I didn't realize there were so many alleged DogMan pictures.
Yeah. Well, you know, the whole thing about DogMan was, and what prompted me to make the Man-Wolf Files was the DogMan case is such an interesting one to me because, full disclosure, I do not think DogMan is real. But what is interesting to me about the phenomenon is, there has to be some part of it that I'm not understanding, because I have met plenty of people who I think are lying to me. I've met a few people who I think are completely sane and sincere. And I might think that they misinterpreted what they saw, but they are fully convinced that they saw some kind of upright canine-like animal that they had never before seen or seen since. So the phenomenon is interesting to me, especially in that regard. But I think what was really important about it to me was that whether or not I was right about the phenomenon, what I did know is that at the time that I began putting together the idea for Man-Wolf Files, it had started to fall victim to, I don't even know what to call it, but this kind of form of sensationalism where people would, maybe solely for the fact that it has some inherent pop culture value because it's a werewolf, right?
Right.
Maybe just because of that, people really often put together fake DogMan photos and just kind of pass them off. And it falls so nicely as a subject into that realm of creepy early internet lore, where you see a photo or a series of photos on some forum that has a black background with white text and it's hard to read. Right. That doesn't have concrete background to it. It's just what the forum is saying. There's no names, there's no dates. And after a while, I was like, I'm invested in taking cryptozoology seriously. And even if I don't think that DogMan is real, it's part of this subject, whether I like it or not. And I want to further the research into, on the off chance that something is real, further interest into a species, or in my case, further the understanding of the phenomenon on a psychological level. And part of that was we need to clean out the closet of all of the stuff that we know is not real.
Yeah.
And the first episode is about what appears to be, probably not anymore, but was for a very long time, the most famous DogMan photo ever. And I knew it was a fake the first time I saw it because I had seen that picture of a werewolf before in, like, I think it was like Harry Potter concept art or something like that.
Yeah.
And sure enough, the first thing I did was I did a reverse image search on the picture, because what that will do is it basically scans a picture and says, let's find the closest matches to this, whether they're exact matches or just really close.
Yeah.
And see where else this picture exists. The first result was a picture that hit the internet before the version of it with the werewolf hit the internet, where the werewolf is not in the photo.
Oh, wow.
It's an old photography blog that just took a picture of this empty barn during the night because it kind of looked cool. And someone spliced out a werewolf from a different picture, put some motion blur to it so it looked like it was moving, threw it in the photo, And this has been remarked and used as a DogMan photo for like over 10 years since.
Wow. Jeez.
And it was that easy.
Yeah.
Not only was it that easy to find the origin, but the point of the series was also, the point of the series initially was like to inform the audience on like, hey, don't let yourself be fooled, because it really is that easy to just make something like this. Anybody who has a rough knowledge of Photoshop can make something that looks pretty convincing.
Yeah.
Especially if it's supposed to be like an old photograph.
Oh yeah, for sure.
And some stuff that we do in the series has also been investigations into just old werewolf stories or Dogman stories that are not necessarily tied to any form of photographic evidence or anything like that. Just an interesting story sort of thing.
Yeah. Yeah, one of the episodes is the effect of reiteration, which I thought was interesting. This is sort of like just sort of the snowball effect of the stories in a sense.
Yeah, that's that was kind of the episode that I wanted to put together to sort of really encapsulate what I wanted the series to be about. Which it really is meant to inform the audience more than anybody who shows you these pictures. Maybe not anybody, but anybody who makes these pictures will ever inform you. Yeah. And especially with the advent of like AI. I mean, the amount of AI pictures.
It's terrible now.
AI that I've seen of like, this is from a trail cam in Maine. And it's like, there's no trail cam with that level of clarity. First off, this is like a 4K trail camera. This shot belongs in the Avengers. It's like some of it's not even formatted correctly, but people don't know that. Nobody who's never lived out in the woods and used a trail camera enough, even it took me comparing it to the format of trail cameras to realize these pictures don't even match the formatting of a trail camera. There's no correct overlays, the size ratio is off, the DPI of the image doesn't even exist in trail cameras. Like it's intricate stuff like that. And the whole episode about the reiteration effect is about how photos, or even stories, but a lot of times photos, get out onto the internet. And there's this problem that happens where even if the real story is either really easy to find or has been posted with it, someone is going to take it and sensationalize it and will make up a fake story behind a photo that isn't even theirs. That's happened quite a lot, especially on Facebook. And because it's sensational, it's more entertaining. And because it's more entertaining, it gets more attention. And so it is that version of the story, even though it's fake, is reiterated time and time and time and time again, until even though it's not the real story, it has carved a place into the zeitgeist and the real story has not.
Right. Exactly.
And that's mainly how these things fool people, is like that.
Yeah, for sure. They just keep getting reposted with a different. I've run into this with some other stuff in the paranormal through my job at Coast to Coast, where it's like I'll see a thing on a international website, and I'll be like, wait a minute, and it'll say it happened. Like it'll be some local, it's a Spanish website or whatever. Let's say it happened in this town. I'm like, I've seen that picture before. And I'll like do a reverse search, and I'll be like, that was published like 7 years ago, and that time it allegedly happened in Portugal, and like someone had just. Someone in the other country just took it and like put it on their the social media there, like on the local area. And then it spread there. And no one even noticed. That happens, very often. It's really kind of funny.
The crazy thing is it doesn't even need to be some elaborate effort to do it. I think one of my favorite examples is, I'm sure you've, I think we've mentioned that you've talked to Haley Eldridge from Cryptozoology Facts.
Oh yeah,
on Facebook, and we have this running gag because people on posts for the Patterson-Gimlin film, there's always several people who are like, "But Roger Patterson admitted to faking this on his deathbed. Never happened. There is no historical record whatsoever of that happening." But because they've seen like 15 other people say it on a Facebook post,
oh god, yeah,
they assume it's common knowledge, and it's not. So,
yeah, that's always the irritating part when they're like, they say all that shit and then they end it with like stupid, You know, it's like, yeah, okay. Oh, sorry. Yeah. All right, dude.
Bullying is always the most like ridiculous thing to end it with.
Yeah. They always just want to like, they sort of insult you. Like, you don't know what you're talking about. It's like,
It's like
you're coming at me with a completely infactual thing. This is not.
Yeah, it's crazy how those kind of things just spread like wildfire.
Now you look at like 6 or 7 or so, half dozen pictures on Man-Wolf files, and I presume, like I said, these are long, so I didn't get a chance to watch them all. Is there any that stood out to you that you were like, okay, this one maybe is pretty good? Maybe this one I can't quite poke any holes in this one, or are they all pretty lousy?
There are 2, I would say. One of them I still think is fake. I just don't know how they did it, which I got to give them credit for. One of the big reasons I think it's fake is that you see this happen sometimes in cryptozoology because it can be such an easy it's easy cannon fodder for ridiculing stuff. So the article that talks about this case was posted on April 1st, which was kind of the first okay, you already kind of have to go into this expecting that there's going to be some embellishment to make this funny in some way. But it was a blog post of a guy who was just talking about essentially investigations that he did in the UK countryside into high strangeness. And there was a guy who owned a piece of property that was a farm, I think. And I don't know if fen or the fen is like a region in specific or a type of place. I think it might be a type of place. It's been a few years since I looked into this.
I know exactly what you mean about fen. I guess it's one of those English things that's confusing, and I know people listening in England will be laughing at it. It's like, is it like a field or is it the field? I can't remember either.
Right.
Yeah.
The case is called the Fen Werewolf, and there's these 2 photos, I think maybe 3 photos. Yeah, 3 photos associated with it that are supposedly from a home camera, which is the first thing that got me to think it's fake, because it really is. I mean, you've seen what home cameras look like. They're not high quality. They're good quality enough that you can tell when you're looking at a person and what their face looks like if they're close enough and all that. They're not, a potato you mount to your roof or anything.
Right. But
again, this is a shot that is like this guy must have had a lot of money to mount this to his, side of his barn.
Yeah.
And there's this right out in the open, no question about what's there. It's a pale-ish, fur-covered wolf human-looking thing.
Yeah.
And there's a shot where it's coming in. There's a shot where it's looking away. There's a shot where it's looking kind of adjacent to the camera.
Okay.
Reasons that I think it's fake is, for one thing, the setup is kind of weird. A lot of it's anonymous, and so there's not a whole lot to go off of. The camera situation weirds me out, especially because the shot where it's walking in does not look like a shot a camera takes when something is moving. It looks like motion blur has been added to the subject to make it look like it's moving in real time. Plus, I mean, for a camera to get that level of quality, you'd also assume that it's probably footage. And there's only stills. So I don't know if it was meant to be stills from footage or if it's meant to be taking still pictures.
Yeah.
There was something weird about the shadows in the picture. I couldn't quite place it, but there was something about a light source that seems to not illuminate the subject correctly.
Yeah.
So you have, some equipment behind it, and you have it standing here, and there's a clear light source out in front of it somewhere, casting light onto the thing here and onto it. But there's also like a cross shadow coming in across the equipment from behind that doesn't seem to be affecting the subject.
I see what you're saying.
And forgot to add in the extra shadow.
Gotcha.
So that's the reason that I think the Fen Werewolf is fake, but I don't know how they did it, because it does look pretty good. I don't think it's a costume. I think it had to have been digital. I don't know how they got to make. I mean, it looks really good.
All right.
So there's that one. And there's one that I don't think is fake. I don't know what it is. There's this YouTube channel that definitely leans more towards the paranormal persuasion called Hellbent Holler. And I got to use some material of theirs in season 2 of Man-Wolf Files. they had gone out to somewhere in Kentucky, I think. At some point, when they're using their thermal to look around, there is the sound of some kind of large animal, and they do catch something that is giving off a lot of heat, and it looks like it's crouched behind like a little tiny hill, and it looks like the top of its head, and it looks like something that maybe has fur, and it's got these two really big pointed ear looking things. So, like the top of a wolf's head. Doesn't mean that it wasn't a wolf. Doesn't even necessarily mean that it was particularly anything, because between the shots that they have, it moves slightly, but it's not like the movement's terribly obvious either. I think that it's an animal of some kind. I just don't know what it is.
Right. Yeah, it could be a domestic dog, just a big one somehow.
It could be anything.
Behind a hill. Yeah,
absolutely.
Yeah.
One of my favorite things about all of this is, you occasionally hear DogMan stories that are way more believable than the average one. Season 2 also had another episode like that where they kind of get a lot of stuff gets lumped into DogMan, but the more you look at it, you're like, this isn't really a werewolf story. This sounds way more grounded than that. There is an episode that we did in season 2 talking to this researcher, Aaron Dees, who did research into a place in Texas he calls the Dogman Triangle, which is this interesting area of historical activity for unknown canine type sightings. And he got to talk to a guy whose story actually was in the newspaper in like the 80s or something. And he said that he had a few run-ins with, he didn't know what they were. He said that they kind of looked like hyenas to him, but they, he wasn't willing to say this was a hyena. He's just like, it looked kind of like one. And they got pretty close to his property. And at one point he actually was chasing down one of them on horseback, and I guess it outpaced him. And his description isn't,
are these bipedal, like a bipedal hyena though?
I'm unclear on that. Okay. I think that what he said is he had seen them a couple of times upright, but most of the time they were quadrupedal.
All right.
And he pretty much stuck his neck out and said, I don't know what other people think of this. I don't know what it was, but it was not a wolf. This is not something typical. And he has footage that is not good footage. So it's not like he was trying to impress people with this.
Right.
It literally could be his dog out in the field for all I know. I mean, it looks, it's a black quadrupedal dog shaped thing that like stumbles around a field on all four legs for like, half a minute or something. But in a weird way, that kind of footage is more believable than like,
that's true. Yeah.
It's like, I've got this crazy good footage of a werewolf. It's like, I feel like most encounters with people who come across, to me at least, as like sound of mind and aren't trying to trick me is like, dude, if you want to watch my footage, go ahead, but you're not going to learn anything from it, And that was kind of this guy's approach. And we got to include like the quotes from the newspaper that he gave back in the 80s. And just really interesting. Like, okay, he's not really describing a werewolf. He's describing some kind of wild canine that doesn't really look familiar to him, that has unusual behavior patterns.
Right.
And that to me has always struck me as more swallowable, if that makes sense.
Yeah, more believable. Yeah. Well, you're very discerning, so it makes me wonder what you think of obviously the big daddy of them all, the Patterson-Gimlin. Where do you stand on all that?
Well, okay. So I'm going to always try to give a caveat to my standpoints, which is
right.
I'm not omnipotent and I'm not an expert. I am maybe, I don't like to say DogMan is not real, for example. I like to say I'm not convinced that DogMan is real.
That's fair. Yeah. That's a very...
I definitely have bias towards the Patterson-Gimlin film. But what I will say is that I am not convinced that it was possible or even just feasible to fake it the way that they would have had to have faked it. That being said, even as somebody who leans towards thinking it's real, I will say there's a few things about it that really, like, metaphorically keep me up at night thinking about whether or not it actually is real. There's a little known fact here that I think is not talked about enough, and I say that as somebody who believes the film is real personally. The morning that it was shot, Patterson and Gimlin had been camping out, and I think it was an hour to 2 hours before Gimlin woke up, Patterson rode out to the film site, and we do not know why he did that.
Interesting.
And I think, again, even as somebody who thinks it's real personally, that to me screams he went out there to meet with the guy who was going to wear the suit, to go over the shtick so Bob wouldn't know it was fake.
Right.
That, yeah. I mean, it's kind of, that one's a hard one to reconcile for me. I mean, I guess it could have been reconnaissance, but he'd also been out to that spot beforehand. So it wasn't like he didn't know the terrain.
Yeah.
He knew where he was taking.
Suspicious.
Yeah. It's very suspicious. That being said, I mean, the effort that you'd have to go through as somebody who Roger did not have very good financial backing at all in his life. In fact, it's a miracle he had a camera, because locally people did not like renting cameras to him, because he often kept them for too long, because it would take too long for him to get the money together to pay for that rental. So he was very financially unreliable. That's one reason he wrote a book, was to try and make some money off of it. And at the time he hadn't made a lot of money off of that. There is the fact that he had a brother-in-law, Al Diatley, who was at the time kind of an up-and-coming entrepreneur who had made a good deal of money. It is entirely possible that Al Diatley funded whatever suit Patterson had made. I'm just not convinced that Al did. Yeah. There's no record of him giving him the amount of money that seems like he would have needed, first off, because we're talking a suit that, by comparison, I actually wrote an article about this that got published in Bigfoot Quest magazine. Let's compare it to a movie that came out in 1967, the same year, from Toho Studios, which, to be fair, Toho kind of ran off of a charm for their like Godzilla and monster movies of kind of crappy looking suits. But they also had a pretty good budget for those effects. They were very successful and had a lot to lean on. They came out with a King Kong movie that year called King Kong Escapes. And the suit in that movie is the worst piece of crap you have ever seen, especially compared to Patty. There really is no comparison. And that was, again, a studio that, for all of the faults, had a lot of money going into it. I forget what the budget exactly was for the movie at the time, but I did some math on that when I wrote the article. And adjusting for inflation, that suit was like somewhere between $100,000 to maybe $1 million to $1.5 million.
Oh, wow.
It was something crazy like that. So financially unreliable Roger would have had to go to Al Diatley, a guy who had made a living at that point off of being really smart with his money, and been like, Al, could I please have $100,000 to $1 million to make Bigfoot footage? Right.
Because then it would have to be state of the art.
Well, that's the thing. That's what they would have needed to make a King Kong Escapes level suit, but they made something infinitely better.
Beyond.
I mean, I don't know if it would have been. I've talked to people who, I have a friend, Chloe Fraser, who she designs like anthropomorphic characters, and so she's done some suit work. I actually have a video on my channel interviewing her for close to an hour, I think, talking about it. And she watched it and she was like, it's not impossible for someone to make this, but it would have been really, really hard. There's stuff that happens that does. It's so hard to translate it into a suit. One of my favorite things is that in some of the enhanced footage, it's interesting because enhancements are always kind of difficult because they can create artifacting, and something that you see for a few frames might actually not be there. This is interesting because the thing that I'm going to refer to, you can tell it is actually real because it moves in a consistent way from frame to frame. So it isn't just like a thing that pops up and then vanishes.
Yeah.
When Patty turns to look at the camera and hits the ground with what is her right leg, a ripple travels up her calf and up to her thigh when her foot hits the ground.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
That to me screams that there's fat and tissue and muscle in that leg. I don't even know how you'd get that to be faked in even a skin tight, hairy suit. I don't. Do you put gelatin between the real?
Yeah, that's that's like the Clumps movie. You know, you got to put somebody in a fat suit, not a fat suit per se, but put someone in a Bigfoot like shell body, and then you put the fur over it. Yeah, we're talking.
Yeah.
And this is like 1967.
You have two suits that you have to make. Yeah.
Yeah. Exactly. Yeah.
So it's. I will never say that I think it's impossible that Roger faked it, and there's even some evidence to say that something fishy was going on. But I have definitely yet to be convinced that Patty is not a real animal. Too much of what happens in the footage has, for me, not yet been satisfactorily explained.
Yeah.
And maybe one day it will. Maybe one day someone will lay it out and I can look at it and I'll be like, man, yeah, I guess if Roger did it like that, he would be able to fake it.
Right.
But yeah, I'm just not convinced. I'm not convinced that's fake.
I'm in the same camp. Yeah. I'm like, it's a very, like the Bodette film, it has quite a history and sort of it's like the story surrounding the film itself is almost as, if not more interesting than,
for sure. For sure.
The film, which is, I was saying to someone a few weeks ago, it's like, someone should get an Academy Award for the Patterson-Gimlin film, like a retroactive one, like, because I mean that's probably one of the most influential films of all time.
If we prove after Bob Gimlin passes away, if we prove that he knew about the hoax, was in on it, and never revealed it, that man needs to get a Hollywood star of fame. You know,
sure. Well, you raised the interesting possibility. Yeah, I had thought about this. It didn't dawn on me actually till I was having this conversation, same one, about the film with someone, that people always go, "Oh, they could have faked it. They could have faked it." It's like, well, one of them could have faked it, and the other one might not have known. And in the situation that I always imagine is the one you're saying, that like Patterson faked it. And unbeknownst to Gimlin, then Patterson, obviously he didn't know he was going to die, but like Gimlin was never smartened up to what happened. So he believes that it really did happen that way, but Patterson could have faked him out. I mean, that's entirely, but everyone always goes, well, everyone always thinks it's a they or nothing. And it's like, well, it may not be they. It's just because their names are together on the film doesn't mean necessarily that one of them didn't fake it and the other one. Right. It's like, if you really want to sell the thing, it's like you like if you and I went out into the woods and I set it up, and you'd be a true believer because you saw it. You know what I mean?
I would not guess that you would fool me.
Like,
I would go to my grave,
right?
Tim Binnall.
But you know, I mean, if you have an on-site witness like that that isn't clued in that it's a fake, and they believe it and they bought it, then you're like, you have a zealot in a sense. No disrespect to Gimlin. You're an eyewitness to the thing. You're like, I know what I saw, and that's what.
At that point, there would be no better way to reinforce your hoax than to fool the guy you're with in the room, so to speak. Right. Yeah, because then you have a guy who believes it no matter what, because he saw it happen. There is some, Roger Patterson once said in a radio interview, "I am the worst person for this to have happened to." And I think he was right, because the more and more I learned about Roger, the more reason I see people to not believe him at all. The whole going to the site an hour before Gimlin woke up is already weird. He was not exactly liked by rental companies, for example. There's one story that I think is where the rumor about the deathbed confession comes from. And it is that for a couple of the sessions where it was showed to people, like on a projector, Bob Gimlin could not make it. Roger, I don't know who the friend was, had a guy who he knew who looked enough like Bob, and he had him stand in with him and called in Bob Gimlin. And that actually, as far as I remember, created a fissure between him and Gimlin that was only resolved in the days leading up to Roger dying of cancer. So the deathbed confession was not about the footage being faked. It was, as far as I know, like a
deathbed reconciliation,
reconciling with Bob Gimlin. Yeah.
Right. Interesting. Okay.
Yeah. So I think that's where that story actually comes from. I think people hear vague stories that are versions of that, and over time, that kind of just reiteration effect, right? It's snowballed into, oh, well, Patterson confessed to faking something on his deathbed. Patterson confessed to faking the film on his deathbed. Yeah.
Gotcha. Yeah. It's a wild story. It's really, it's one of my favorite. That's why when, we kept going over all these sort of videos and stuff, I was like, oh, I gotta get his opinion on Patterson-Gimlin. Yeah. It's very, it's funny because it's this great movie, and then like swirling around it is all of this suspicious shit where it's like, the whole thing about like how they just transported the movie and like they didn't really, it's like, this is you just filmed Bigfoot, dude. Like I wouldn't let that out of my sight, and they're just like kind of put it on a plane or whatever, it's like there's a lot of like kind of weird elements to the whole thing, the circumstances of it all, how Patterson was a Bigfoot guy. It's like the whole thing is like the worst. Like you were saying, I'm the worst person. Like the worst person to capture. Like, dude, you could go out tomorrow and film like a crystal clear Bigfoot video, and people would be like, "Yeah, he's a Bigfoot. He's the Bigfoot guy." So already we don't believe you, and it's like, well, come on, dude. So
I think it's a person to film Champ probably at this point. I would be.
There you go. Yeah.
Like I go to the mouth of the Ausable River and I film like the exact same thing, and it's like, well, I can't show this to anybody.
But the film itself, the core of the thing, is really so fucking good. Yeah, I think that's almost the paradox where it's like you have all these colorful characters, you have all this shadiness, and it's like the shadiness, the colorful characters, none of that translates to the movie. There's no like, they don't that like you think it's like this sort of ragtag crew. They would make fucking some critical mistake that would have blown up the movie by now. You know what I'm saying? Like the movie has withstood the test of time, despite all of the swirling weirdness around it. Like the best argument I've heard for why the movie isn't real is also like the worst argument, and that is that it's just too fucking good. It's like it's too good to be true. I hear almost like skeptic people, like it breaks their mind. They check out and they're like, I don't know how they did it, but it's too good. It can't possibly be real. That's like and to me, it's like that is the best and the worst fucking argument, because you're right. It's too good to be true, and it's like hard to like almost let yourself believe it.
It is exactly like that, because it's like there's such a thin line between it's so good it has to be real, and this feels like a master psyop that Roger Patterson has constructed. Yeah, it's so interesting in that way.
Yeah, I love it. It's one of the greatest movies ever made, even if it's only like
absolutely
3 seconds or
absolutely.
Now, I'll hit you with a couple of more quick talking points. I'll get you out of there. I know you said folks are probably meandering around the house there. I don't want to keep you up too late. One of the new character that I hadn't heard of, I discovered through Crash Course Cryptozoology. And I've been talking to a lot of folks sort of who are bubbling up here in the crypto world. We learned about a lot of new creatures that even I haven't heard of, even though I've been around forever. There's always some new thing that I'm like, wait, what the hell's that? And this is the Burrunjor.
Yes, the Burrunjor.
Let's talk a little bit about this. What is this creature?
This used to be my all-time favorite cryptid, and for a while, it was like as hands-off with my own beliefs as I try to be. It used to be that one hill where I was like, I'm going to die on the hill that I think this might be real. It was first written about. I think it's kind of the only time, aside from internet articles, that it was ever written about by the Australian cryptozoologist who just died a couple of years ago, Rex Gilroy.
Oh, I know that name. Yeah.
Yep. And he wrote about it in the 90s in a book called Burrunjor, Australia's Living Tyrannosaurus, I think he was the subtitle. And it's a whole book. I actually have a copy. I don't have it here, but I have it in storage. This whole case book about supposedly these local stories from both like Australian citizens and native Australians, the Aboriginal people, supposedly have stories of what can really only be described as like a surviving Tyrannosaurus.
Yeah.
Very typical, like,
full size.
Full size. Yeah. We're not talking like a small version, like a full theropod dinosaur.
Jesus.
And, I just got so interested in it because the outback is such a mystifying place for me, first off. Yeah. And I'm also an anthropology student and I love other cultures. And for me, Aboriginal Australian culture is so interesting. Here's a quick fun fact about that for you. There's a no longer spoken Australian Aboriginal language where the word for dog is the same as it is in English. These are not languages that, as they developed, interacted with each other. By pure coincidence, we both called domesticated canines dog.
Wow, that's weird.
How interesting is that, right?
That's really interesting.
And the Burrunjor was so cool because there was supposedly all this, these petroglyphs that had been found that were of these. They looked like theropod dinosaurs, if a little bit outdated or vague looking. There were all these interesting sightings. There was supposedly local knowledge to where there was a road sign that Rex Gilroy supposedly passed by one time in an area where there had been Burrunjor sightings, and there was a kangaroo crossing sign. And he saw that locals had crossed out kangaroo and written T-Rex.
Oh, wow.
And there's these footprints that he had supposedly cast. But here's the thing.
Yeah.
Here's the thing. All of that was mystifying. And then I got the book and I read the book. And at that point, I had been an anthropology student for 3.5 years, I think. And so I kind of had an idea of how you study that sort of record. And Tim, the more I looked at it, the more I was like, I think he made this up.
Yeah.
Which I don't mean to speak ill of a guy who's no longer with us, obviously. Rex Gilroy did contribute a lot of important stuff to cryptozoology outside of the Burrunjor. He called a lot of attention to the Yowie sightings in Australia and to thylacine reports. But the first giveaway for me was that he didn't give any names of eyewitnesses. When he did, they were just very generic first names. Gary, from...
Oh, it's always Gary.
Whatever. And he would quote them, but they spoke the same way he writes, which is really Shakespearean and distinguished sounding, not what the average Australian person sounds.
Gotcha. Yeah, that's quite a tell. Yeah.
So it was kind of like, okay, that sounds like he wrote that, not that someone told that story to him. And, the more stuff I heard from this book, I looked at the petroglyph pictures he found, and I realized, looking at the petroglyphs, I was like, there's something off about this. And I looked at every other known Aboriginal petroglyph and rock art and all of that. It is not the same style whatsoever. It's a good comparison. Well, people listening can look up Aboriginal artwork. And if you look up the Burrunjor artwork he's referring to, he drew it as an outline of a T-Rex with chalk on a rock or something. It's not using dyes. It's not using any kind of paint. It's not carved well. It's not even old looking. It doesn't have the same wear and tear that actual rock art does. So it's evidently recent. And as for the footprints, I think he probably did find some actual dinosaur footprints. They were probably fossilized, though. There's at least one that does look like it's genuinely from a large theropod. And I think in 2017, we did find that there was a species of what we call megaraptors that lived out in Australia. And they were pretty sizable, and they were very large theropod dinosaurs. My guess is he found a couple of those. There were plenty of holes in rocks that he found and photographed and said that those were dinosaur footprints. I don't know why he did that. He also outlined those in chalk so that you could see them, because you couldn't see them
like when you put the red circle around the thing on.
Yeah. Well, off of one footprint, he also named a whole species after himself.
Yeah, all right. It's just something, that he kind of had a little fun with, maybe, where he was just like, okay, I'm gonna take this one story, I'm gonna just really like elaborate on it, because why not? Let's have some fun with it, kind of.
I think that was the case, and I'll also say this: I just a few months ago, I found a picture. Completely, I can't. It felt like divine that I found this. I was scrolling through YouTube and I found a clip that showed off a sign that's for a kangaroo crossing in Australia, and someone had like cut out little pieces of cardboard, or not cardboard, construction paper, like black construction paper, and just made it look like some random monster, because the picture of the kangaroo was always like hunched over, and so it's really
so
bright,
it's like
just drawing stuff on it. So I think if there was a T-Rex crossing sign, I don't think it was referencing actual Burrunjor sightings. It seems like it's kind of a common joke for people to vandalize those signs and make the kangaroo look weird.
That makes sense. Yeah. Well, I also, I thought that too, where it's like, maybe this could have been like a combination of it, but like, maybe this guy was people were kind of taking a piss with this guy too, where they were kind of like telling him tall tales. Yeah, that
quite possibly
of stuff they saw. Yeah, like, oh yeah, you wouldn't believe it. Oh yeah, it's like, and this guy, he could have just bought into it. Who knows?
Yeah, I will say
it's pretty wild.
The Burrunjor is one of those things that I was so ready to leave it entirely behind, and then something happens that pulls me back in a little bit. And back in 2017, before I read the book, it was finding out that we had just found, the correct size of theropod dinosaur in the fossil record to match the Burrunjor in Australia. And of course, that was before I read the book and realized all of this. But there was something else that I found years ago that I never made a video about until last year. And it was a piece of very interesting footage shot by this guy named Frankie Shoveler. And Frankie Shoveler is part of a music group in Australia called the Shoveler Family Band. And they have their own Instagram and everything. And he took some footage of these footprints in the sand on the coastal part of where he was living in the outback. I don't know if it's actually part of the outback, but it's lined up against it, I think. This would have been somewhere in the northwestern part of Australia. I forget exactly where. It's in a community called Bidjadanga, but I don't know where Bidjadanga exactly is.
Okay. Yeah.
And these local kids found these weird footprints, and it's sand. So it's not like it's fossilized rock or something. It's recent.
Okay. Yeah.
And it's these massive 3-toed theropod looking footprints.
Oh, weird.
Like it's a giant pigeon or something. And, we have, what are they called? Emus. There we go. In Australia. Yeah. And there's one shot where someone's foot is next to one of the footprints. And that's the only size comparison that I was able to find that I could even use in the footage. If that guy has an average, length of a male's foot, it's a pretty big footprint that he's standing next to. And it's a very long line of them that runs down the coast. Yeah. And obviously bipedal, not just from the way that the tracks are oriented, but just because of the shape of the foot. That's not a 4-legged animal. And it would need to be, I think it was 1.5 times the size of the largest emu that we've ever had on record.
Oh, wow.
Because the way that I figured that out was, if you take the estimate of how long that guy's foot is, you can get like a rough estimate for how long the footprint is. And if you just scale that in an image of a guy standing next to an emu, you especially if it's a side profile and you get the whole length of the emu's foot in that side profile, you scale that up and it's massive. Which of course is not me saying that it was therefore a dinosaur. I don't think that that's evidence of that.
Yeah.
But it could be evidence that maybe occasionally we have these enormous emus, or maybe some other kind of flightless bird that we just don't know about, or whatever it might be.
Yeah, right.
And maybe Rex Gilroy got the idea for the Burrunjor from reports of someone being like, hey, I saw this big bird theropod shaped thing, and it left these weird tracks, and they look like dinosaur footprints.
Yeah.
maybe he got it from that. But he definitely made up most of it / embellished a lot.
Yeah. Now, what about the Ropen? You've done a lot of research on the Ropen, and this is one of those where I know vaguely of the Ropen, but I gun to my head, I couldn't tell you much about it. So this is like the Ropen is like the pterodactyl, like bird, like is that what we're thinking? Like a remnant sort of.
Here we go.
Or am I wrong?
Here we go.
Okay.
So bringing it so full circle here, talking about the Burrunjor right there, and talking about birds a little bit, and talking about the reiteration effect. The Ropen being described as a pterodactyl is absolutely a result of skewing eyewitness data. I actually wrote a whole paper on this that was published in Yearbook of Cryptozoology, which I think is a German publication. I wrote a paper called, Towards a Reevaluation of Evidence for Flying Species in Papua New Guinea. And it's all about examining all of the existing literature and data that we have on what we call the Ropen. And the conclusion that I came to is that the problem with the data is that most of the researchers who jumped on this phenomenon are people who, unfortunately, had a predetermined conclusion in mind. The most notable is Jonathan Whitcomb. Garth Guessman is another one. And there is a third one whose name I'm forgetting. This was a couple of years ago that I wrote this paper, and my memory is not that great. But they are, and I'm not trying to, I want to clarify this in the paper. This is not me talking about their actual beliefs. It's about how they apply their beliefs to their research. Mm-hmm. They're all young Earth creationists. And their whole idea was, well, if we can prove, and John Whitcomb said this outright. I want to prove that this is a living dinosaur, because if I prove that this is a living dinosaur, I can put forward very strong evidence that dinosaurs and humans have always coexisted, which is the perspective that I hold with my young Earth creationism. Right. Because if the planet is not millions of years old and only thousands of years old, dinosaurs simply have not had enough time to go extinct.
Right.
So he went into
the third guy Ken Ham or no?
I may have met him, but no, that wasn't.
He's like the big dad. He's the guy who created the Ark in Kentucky.
Oh, is he?
He's like, yeah. He's
probably mentioned somewhere in one of the books. Then John,
I'm sure John knows who he is. Yeah. All right. So these guys, they. I interrupted you now. So he was in the. So you're saying these guys sort of reiterated this and made it into more than it
jumped on it first, too, to be fair, because the original phenomenon is first recorded in the 50s by I forget what her profession was actually called, but she studied insects, and her name's Evelyn Cheeseman, and she was stationed out in Papua New Guinea investigating all of the types of insects and bugs that are out there. And she herself, in her writings on that trip, notes this weird light phenomenon where in the skies over Papua New Guinea, there is not only by word of mouth does she know this, she sees it herself, this pair of lights that appears in the sky sometimes during the night. I do not remember if she describes them as moving, but she may have. So that's the first note that we get of something weird. That spins into the Ropen when John Whitcomb hears in the early 2000s, I think, just like whispers of weird flying animal sightings, goes there, and to his credit, even though him and his fellow researchers definitely skewed the data, they are the biggest contributors to what we know about the phenomenon. Okay. And to make a very long story short, because you kind of have to go not necessarily through my paper, but I like to think that hopefully my paper presents this well enough. By comparing data from what eyewitnesses have actually said to how they interpreted it in their books, they build like visual models of what people are talking about. And when you really look at them, they don't really match what people are talking about. The idea, for example, that there's it can't be some kind of bird because there's no description of feathers. It's like, well, actually, you guys have like 12% of them do describe either like fur or down or feathers. And a few of them say that they didn't observe any feathers, one guy said it looked leathery, and then the other half of the witnesses say it wasn't clear enough. I don't know what the body cover.
Right. Oh, well,
so it's less clear than how they present it, right? There's a major problem with one witness they talked to, Gideon Coro. And Gideon Coro does provide a sketch of some kind of large winged animal with what looks like a beak at the front of the face. There's a problem, though, and this is a problem that is prevalent in a lot of their research, and it's that they don't bother to clarify things with the eyewitness enough. Gideon supposedly saw a very large ropen, which the word ropen is an actual word, but it can mean several different things in different dialects. In this context, it can mean whatever this unknown animal might be. There's one dialect where it refers to a specific kind of bat. And there's also a dialect where it just means bird. So hard to tell what exactly this is. But in the interview, and he has this filmed, a lot of John Whitcomb's interviews are filmed, actually. And they have a lot of trouble deciphering if Gideon, when he talks about the length of the animal, is talking about the wingspan or the length of the body or what the length of one wing was. And they don't really bother to really get down to the nitty-gritty of that. So the finders are kind of all over the place. And there's also disagreement on whether Gideon meant he saw one of them or there were many of them. And when they asked his friends who were supposedly there with him, most of them just said, I don't know, I'll agree with whatever Gideon said about it. So it's not
that's so weird
at all. And for them to draw conclusions from that is definitely not, that's not valuable data, unfortunately.
Right.
And there's a few other eyewitnesses that they talk to. There's an eyewitness sketch that's given that for whatever reason, they say in the book, this is not a sketch of what he saw, even though he saw something. This is a sketch of what locals say it looks like. And it's like, then why did he draw this? Right. I don't understand why. Why would I, as someone who believes in Sasquatch, who believes that I've seen one, if you came to me, Tim, and were like, I want you to draw the Sasquatch that you saw, and I draw something and I tell you this isn't what I saw, but this is what my friends say a Sasquatch looks like, that something weird is going on there, clearly.
Right. Yeah.
I think a lot of it probably is due to mistranslation. Obviously, there's a language barrier. And the cool thing about the Ropen, though, is that as I wrote that paper and looked through all of the data, I don't think it's like the Burrunjor case where it's made up by somebody. I think that it's a phenomenon that is happening, that it has not been, and unfortunately people who skew the data jumped on first. There is this researcher who is an actual native Papua New Guinean guy named Rex Yappy, and he has published a few interviews with people where he has like subtitles because he speaks the native language with them. And in those examples, they call it a bird, but they do describe a very unusual bird. One of my favorite descriptions is a guy who saw it, and he literally just called it the bird. And he said that he saw it perched in a tree, had a very long tail, which a lot of tropical birds of paradise do. It was a large bird, though, and a lot of those birds are quite small. And that the end of the tail emanated light somehow.
Wow.
And there are a few examples of people who supposedly have seen it, who associate whatever flying animal they saw with the light phenomenon that also happens, that Evelyn Cheeseman back in the 50s wrote about.
Wow.
The variations of the color of light differ a lot. We have footage of some of this light phenomenon. We have one that was shot on Destination Truth, which is another cryptozoology show that was popular back in the early 2010s, I think. And we have footage from an eyewitness named Paul Nation, who was visiting Papua New Guinea. There is no known footage that actually shows the flying animal. There have been purported pieces of footage, and they are definitely not an unusual bird species.
Yeah.
They are absolutely a species of frigate bird. We have the lesser and greater frigate birds in Papua New Guinea, and the only difference really is size. And it's really clear from the footage that that's what it is. I mean, one of them isn't even that far from the camera. One of them is very blurry, and funny enough, I got to compare it to a photo of frigate bird, this piece of footage that had this blurry thing flying in the sky. And I found that if you just defocus an image of a frigate bird in the exact same position, it looks identical. So, it's but what's interesting to point all that out is I think that whatever the Ropen is a real thing.
Yeah.
It seems like there's enough witnesses who, I mean, these are not people who, aside from the occasional researcher who cares to ask them, are getting publicity from
Right.
either describing weird light phenomenon or sometimes describing encounters with a flying animal that they associate with that phenomenon. And sometimes we do have interesting descriptions. I can see where people like John Whitcomb decided that this could be a pterodactyl, based on his belief. I mean, we have descriptions of, it has ridges on its back, or it's got a head crest of some kind that goes backwards, parallel to the neck, and a really long beak. But the thing is that, again, when you look at those descriptions, it's like, okay, well, what does long beak mean? And you start to see that it doesn't describe it as like a bony beak or a leathery beak. It's just a long beak. One person said it looked like a pelican beak. And you have, the ridges in the back. It's like, okay, well, how would you see that in a bird? Well, a bird that's living in like a place where it rains all the time and maybe hasn't preened itself in the past day might have really messed up looking feathers running down its spine or running down its belly or wherever. So when you're far away, you can interpret that differently if the whole thing you're looking at is very unusual. Even descriptions of people who supposedly saw it close enough to see digits on the wings, which you would think is very classical pterodactyl. We do have one species of bird in South America, the hoatzin, that when it is born, it still has digits with claws on the angles of its wings.
Oh, wow.
So that all of the things that the Ropen is described as exist in birds. I mean, head crests, those are prevalent in many species of tropical birds, not even unusual. So my whole thing with it is the only thing that's really unusual about the Ropen is maybe one or two of the reports where it like attacked a person. There's a popular one where it supposedly flew down to a fresh grave to scavenge on the body, which you have to take with a grain of salt, because as somebody who has studied anthropology, the thing about other cultures in general, I mean, every culture, including ours, has folklore. And to the degree to which that people believe that is kind of an individual basis. There will be people who probably hear that story and be like, that never happened. I don't know who made that up. That's never happened in this village.
Right. There are people who already now believe you. Yeah. They believe it right now, just hearing it once.
Which is not to write it off completely, but folklore like that exists. And I see no reason for that to not match the bill. And even if it did actually happen, it's not like there are no large birds of prey that would scavenge a dead body if they were really hungry. So it's not even, none of this is exclusive to pterodactyls or pteranodons or any kind of flying reptile. None of it is. The only unusual thing really is the light phenomenon. That's the
I was just about to bring that up because that made me wonder, like, because I like to wonder, how do we, and I'm sure there's some biologist people who would be like, no, but it's like, look, in these large swaths of land, like, how do we know there aren't like bioluminescent birds? If there's bioluminescent fish, how do we know there aren't bioluminescent birds that like light up at night when they fly through the fucking woods because they live in enormous places where people wouldn't see, not necessarily like they don't want people to see, they don't care, they don't even know any better, but it's just like there's never any people there, so they fly and they light up, and then if people come through, they're not going to hang around anyway because they're like, all right, I'm freaked out. What is this creature that's come into my domain? I'm going to fly up miles away. It's like a bird could fly around, a bunch of hikers, and it wouldn't be a problem. So it's like, we really don't know. I believe that's out of the question that there'd be bioluminescent bird.
Right. I don't think it would be good to say out of the question. Absolutely. I mean, especially with how
it's fantastical, but
it is. But birds themselves, I mean, have you seen what birds do for mating? It's some of them. I mean, the peacock alone is like an incredible animal that, if you had to describe it to somebody who'd never heard of one and didn't know how feather covering worked, the only way you could really describe it is, well, their tail turns into a giant fan and they dance around to impress a mate.
Right, exactly.
That alone is pretty crazy. And I mean, we do have bird species that glow under UV light. So there are types of oils that mammalian bodies secrete that under certain lighting conditions literally give off light. And of course, you also have the idea of like, well, you know, for bioluminescent animals, we have a lot of fish. We also have things like fireflies that are flying animals. Well,
yes,
they're insects, so they're not animals, but they're a flying species that is able to emit their own photons. Basically, I looked into this, and there's a whole chemical reaction that goes into this. But essentially, if you had a bird species that had maybe an organ somewhere on its chest, and a lot of frigate birds actually do have one on their throat,
have that little
yeah, an organ that puffs out, and maybe when it puffs out, there's a chemical reaction that causes what's formed to give off photons. I mean, we don't have an example of that in birds in nature. We have an example of that in a lot of other animals. And so I think that really, I'm almost disappointed with the Ropen research, because it could be so much more like, wow, this is really interesting, because this really seems like something. People are really describing some kind of weird flying animal. They have different names for it. I'm sure sometimes they're talking about an oversized bat or an oversized bird, because and Ropen, obviously. But there's those few examples where they associate it with light, and it's like, that's really weird. That is really odd. And I definitely think that, I don't know if the Ropen exists, but after going through all the research that exists and cleaning out that closet of, well, what can we throw away that just isn't what people are saying, even at the end of that, I was still left with a mystery. I was not left with concrete answers. And I think that was one of the coolest parts about writing that paper.
Yeah, I'll have to check that out. So I've taken up a lot of your time tonight. So we'll get. I've had a blast, dude. I've really had a blast chatting. I feel like we could go much longer, but I'm gonna have to get you back on the show, because there's like 4 or 5 notes here that I didn't manage to get to. So when I get you back on, I'm gonna be like, all right, go back to that interview from January 26th when I had those extra notes. I want to start from there. But we'll wrap it up here on this edition. What's next for you? Now, you've been kind of laying low for the last 6 months, year or so. All that stuff for folks who are just hearing of you now, the Binnall listeners can check out Crash Course Cryptozoology on Facebook and punch it into YouTube. Trust me, you're in for a treat. This is like when people find Binnall of America after all these years, and it's like, holy shit, you got shows that go all the way back to for 20 years. It's like, yeah, man, you're going to be busy. And that's the case with Crash Course Cryptozoology. There's tons of stuff over there, including, like I said, the full length release, the Bodette film documentary, and a few others on there, and some long stuff. And the Man Wolf Files is like a TV show. They're like 22 minutes each. It's tremendous. So until we know what's next for you, folks, check that stuff out. But what's next for you here? You know, the year's just begun. Do you have any plans for 26? Anything shaping up yet?
I would like to see if I can do a little bit of field investigations for southern New Hampshire Sasquatch sightings. And aside from that, I think I really just want to get back on posting on the Facebook group and making videos, because I definitely kind of fell off the wagon with having the time and the motivation to make videos on subjects that I want to talk about. But I've been bitten by that bug again, and I'd really like to continue doing it.
Awesome. Yeah, well, you definitely should, man. You've done a lot of great stuff already, and I know how it is. You kind of dip out for a little bit, and then next thing you know, you turn around and it's like 6 months, 9 months. Shit, it's been a year.
Yeah.
And then it's like, if I'm even going to do anything, it's going to take another like 3 to 6 months till I can get it all together. And why bother? And next thing you know, So I know exactly how you feel, man. But hopefully, you appearing here on Binnall of America has helped fuel that resurgence, and you'll get back out there with some new stuff this year, and keep me posted. And hopefully we cross paths somewhere on the New England scene in the not too distant future as well, man.
I would love that, Tim. Thank you so much for having me on. This has been like such a refreshing and amazing experience. It really has.